You think you know what we're going to talk about.
But unfortunately, I fell down a damn rabbit hole and I've not gotten out yet.
Knife bros.
I literally Googled Sebastian Stan hands.
But just when you least expect it, we changed the game.
Well, yeah, because like usually in astrology, they would partner up air signs with fire signs,
All right, you can huggle.
time travel stories, and
At the end of the day, only one thing matters. We decide.
Well, we should make it a topic. Unfortunately, I didn't take German in school. I took Spanish and I don't remember any of it.
Three Fates Decide podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Three Fates Decide. I'm Liz, and I'm here again with my co-hosts Mary and Sam. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Wow. Okay, another episode. Yep. Gosh. How many episodes is this now?
10.
This is episode 10?
Gosh.
10.
I can't believe we're at 10 at this point. I mean, it's amazing we've gotten this far.
I'm telling you, it's nuts.
I know.
I mean, there are just some podcasts, like, they're lucky if they make it past 5. I mean, especially if you're a solo one, because sometimes it's hard to keep motivated.
No, absolutely, and thank you to everyone who has stayed with us for the 10 episodes. So that's awesome. You guys are awesome.
It's amazing. At some point, we should do, like, if we keep, like, going, we should start doing, like, anniversary episodes or something. That'll be fun.
Hey,
There we
if we can make it to like what episode 50, we should do like a big one for episode 50.
That'll be
Okay.
great. That'll be great.
We'll have to come up with some ideas.
Oh yeah, we'll come up with something crazy that day for that episode. Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, so tonight's topic is something like somewhat related to what we talked about in past episodes, which is like Hollywood movies, things like that. But this is in a slightly different angle. This time we're talking about Hollywood and China. So just as a little bit of background, so I actually suggested this topic, and part of the reason why I suggested this was actually because as we've already established, like we're all into movies and Hollywood and entertainment and stuff. So I actually signed up to a bunch of newsletters from the major Hollywood entertainment publications, which would be Variety, the Hollywood Reporter, and Deadline. So I had noticed within the last, couple of months, actually even more than that, there had been a bunch of different articles where China came up as a subject in one way or another. So that kind of inspired me to bring this up as a potential topic for an episode, which we are doing right now. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough because it is a very significant impact on the entertainment we watch, the relationship between Hollywood and China. So,
Well, I guess one of the things that I was actually reading, and I'm still kind of reading up, trying to catch up on all the stuff that you have posted for us to kind of like do our research on, and kind of just like really kind of get back up into the topic of, is how China's having it's got all these Oscar nominations for movies that are either from China or from Chinese directors, but their government is like stopping their nominations because it doesn't agree, because the movie may not agree with what the Chinese government is also putting out, or I guess is my thing. It's kind of like a little strange in that regards for me.
So, article that I'm reading from Variety, I guess, they were talking about how Chloe Zhao, I guess gave a quote to a magazine for the US, and it like they felt that it slandered China. And the way I feel like they're trying to make it sound is like it slandered the people of China and not the government, but I feel like this is more the Chinese government who's like, "Oh, how dare you?" Because I think what she said was like that it's basically like what an honor it is. Like this is what the Chinese filmmakers want is to get into the U.S. Oscars, and that seemed like, "Oh my God, how dare you!" Like,
Right.
and I just think that's funny because like I think no matter what country it is, everyone like the goal is always Hollywood, US, Oscars, stuff like that. Like I feel like it's the goal for every single country is to get to the Oscars, which is obviously US based. And for China to kind of take this as like a slander toward China, I think is kind of interesting to me.
Right.
That they would take like that they would get so upset about it.
Right.
It-
Right.
what gets me on this on that quote that she gave to that magazine, it was over a decade ago,
Yeah.
and they're still saying that it was a slander to the Chinese who, because it said it offended Chinese nationalists who felt it slandered China. So the movie that got the Oscar nomination was Better Days, and it was a hit in China, which is what gets me. But they're still saying they don't want to do they don't want to have anything to do with the Oscars, or they're not going to even show the Oscars because if it wins, because of her and the director.
Right.
That just boggles my mind.
I just want to emphasize to the audience that my quote unquote expert knowledge of these things is purely because I happen to be a Chinese American. Like my parents came here from Hong Kong and I was born here. So to that extent, I do have some, cultural understanding of these things, but obviously I'm not going to have the experience quite like somebody who was actually born there. But, I have enough knowledge to try to clarify these things. So to your general points earlier about how it's bizarre to you guys why Chloe Zhao would get so much criticism in China, especially about her comments from like 10 years ago. So I guess we could call this segment the Chinese culture 101 section. So now this is not just a Chinese thing, but this is also very common in like a lot of old world cultures in general, especially in Asia. Like but basically you have the concept of presenting a good face to the public, which is like the literal translation of this term. But basically, you want to present to the world a good impression, a good image of yourself. But sometimes it gets to an extreme point where any kind of criticism is seen as like almost an insult to your identity almost, which is why especially if you're like talking about like very old school, very conservative people, they do not like the idea of being publicly criticized because it's almost like a shame, a shame on you that, you are not presenting yourself very well and people are pointing this out about you. And it's like almost public humiliation type of thing. So when we're talking about like the Chinese Communist Party, which is the political party that runs China, they can sometimes take this to a very extreme level where any kind of criticism of their government, they really don't like it. Like, they seriously don't like it. And it can extend to the point where if you criticize things about the society, regardless of whether you're an outsider or you are a Chinese national, a Chinese citizen, you can get into a lot of trouble for it because, like I was just saying before, it's part of the whole image of the society. You want to present yourself as being this amazing, great thing. And yet somebody coming along here is saying this negative stuff about you. You're not going to just sit there and take it. You're going to start fighting back on it. And of course, because you're talking about a government here, one of the easiest things to do to retaliate is by saying, well, okay, you're a director and you're criticizing our society. Therefore, the best way to punish you, if you will, instead of like doing something drastic, like throwing you in jail, which is like using a sledgehammer on the problem, you do it more subtly by saying, we are not going to allow some of your movies to be screened on the millions of movie screens across the country, or you are not allowed to have your next movie compete at the Shanghai Film Festival, things like that. And
Right.
that's why, right, which is why after the Oscars, there were articles that came out how a lot of the news media in China did not report on the fact that Chloe won Best Director, which would make her the first Chinese director to ever win an Oscar. And which is like the complete opposite of what happened in South Korea when, Bong Joon-ho won the previous year, where like, every major news network, in South Korea was like, talking about him winning because he's the first Korean director to win. So it's a fascinating contrast when you look at it that way. Another big thing that came up recently as well, which I don't remember. I think I may have shared the article with you guys when it came out, but just a few weeks ago, when the newest Fast and the Furious movie came out, there was also a lot of controversy in China. They didn't boycott the movie, but they did, talk very negatively online in the Chinese in a lot of the Chinese social network accounts about John Cena, who was in it, because he made the terrible, terrible, scandalous error of referring to Taiwan as a country.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, that is another one. That is another hot button topic in China you do not want to bring up. Never suggest the idea that Taiwan is a country. It's a scandalous idea.
Seems like it. It's almost like you don't want to say anything about anything when it comes to China and their territories and their
Oh yeah.
any of that.
Now, normally we don't want to dive into politics, and we generally won't do that, but for this particular episode, in order to really fully get a better context and understanding of stuff, we do have to kind of mention a little bit about politics and geopolitics with China, because they go kind of hand in hand. So,
Right.
but we'll try to keep it to a minimum here. We'll just stick with understanding enough to get the context of everything. So, yeah. So I think that another reason why we do want to talk about this is because China has a very huge influence on Hollywood, whether the average American person actually realizes this or not. But it's very, it's why do they have this influence? Well, it's the age-old reason that we talked about in the previous episodes about the entertainment industry and Hollywood. It's all about the money. Because, and when you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense, because, China, the population of China is like over 1 billion people, which would make it one of the biggest movie markets in the world when you think about it. And if you are one of those people who are like uber into, the business aspect of Hollywood, you would know that, in recent decades, a lot of the box office profits that Hollywood gets like roughly half of the money comes from foreign movie markets, not domestic. So as important as it is for movies to get a lot of money, in the box office here, which the news sometimes reports on, on the weekends, like on Sunday night, but it's very important for Hollywood to make a lot of money internationally, especially if the movie didn't do that well domestically. And one of the very clear signs of this is actually in recent years, I'm sure some of you may or may, I'm sure a lot of you may have noticed this, but there's been an increase of these action movies that don't have complex plots to them, you know?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do. I do know that.
Yeah. And the big reason why that is because when you are sending these movies out to foreign markets, especially to foreign markets where English may not be a very prominently understood language for for the local people. The easiest thing for people to understand is car chases and things exploding.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know?
That well, and it's, I kind of I'm looking through like the list of things that have been banned and then ones where they're just like edited. And it's funny, a lot of the films that have just been like edited in order to be shown are action movies and things like that, where they can just cut out the stuff that they don't want the people to see and have still all the explosions and the, chases and all that stuff. So it's,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I was talking with Liz about this yesterday when we were looking over the different movies that were banned and things like that, and I had noticed that too. A lot of the ones that were just heavily edited were just ones that were straight up action flicks.
yep,
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
let them through, but they're going to cut out the parts that they don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so the general increase of like action movies, especially ones like I was saying where they don't have like a super complex plot to them, that is a big reason why we've been seeing a lot more of them in recent years. It's because it's easier to market movies like that to foreign, countries where, like I said, a large part of the population may not be familiar with English, really. So it just makes it a lot easier for them to translate, what the actors are saying, in the subtitles and whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Which, of
Makes
course,
sense.
explains why there are 9 Fast and the Furious movies. And you would have thought like 1, possibly 2 would have been enough. But
Yeah.
no, we gotta make more of them because, we can make a lot of money off of it.
Well, I mean, granted, I can see it because I kind of like the mindless action sometimes. Just something I like to put on an action movie where I don't have to think about it. I just know, explosions. Ooh, pretty explosions,
Yep. Yep.
Or
Yep.
pretty cars. Oh, that's a pretty car. That's the extent of the thinking I want to do when I watch those type of movies.
Right.
No, like it definitely makes sense because even like for someone like me, like, where I don't speak a second language or anything like that. So like when I do watch foreign movies and you have the subtitles, like it can get distracting to the point that you miss certain plot points, especially if it's a
Mhm.
heavily dialogued film. So it does make sense to have, these types of movies because you can watch with less dialogue and still get the basic plot. And, it's just, I think, easier to control. I don't want to say control. Control's not a good word, but as you said, like just to translate so that no matter what country it is, they're going to understand the story without having to constantly read, captions, because it's a different language. So it does actually make a lot of sense.
Right. Right. Which is fine in general. I mean, like, I don't blame, Hollywood for wanting to make money. I mean, that's one of the most fundamental things of any for-profit company, industry, what have you, is
Right.
you want to be able to produce stuff that will definitely make you money. But I just wanted to point out that observation just in case, like, anybody in the audience was, didn't notice it. But yeah, that is a big part of it. And anybody who like really follows, the entertainment industry, like the business side, this is not a secret. It's like it's pretty well known. That's a major motivation. So the other thing is that because of the fact that, you're getting so much money from foreign markets and you become aware of what type of movies do extremely well over there. The other thing is that it starts to influence not just what you're producing to, produce for the international market, but it's also influencing the content in general. Because now, if you're aware of, say, certain countries approve or don't approve of certain content in your movies, you're going to have to start thinking about what are you going to allow in your own movies. And the thing is, like I said earlier, is that roughly half of the money that studios are earning from the box office is international, but the other half is here in the US. So now it's also influencing what kind of content we are seeing as well, because we're all watching basically the same movies here, which I think as a part of the US movie-going audience, we should be aware of this, and we should also be slightly concerned, because now it's potentially limiting what type of content we are seeing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which is how, it kind of links up to our previous, to our past episodes about, creativity and, the kind of stuff we're watching is not as creative, at least in the movies, compared to television,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it stinks because I know we've already talked about it that, you know, I personally would like a little bit more creativity, but I can understand that point also. Like you said, at the end of the day, it's to make money. So the easiest way that they're going to do that is to have they basically found a formula that works. In order for that to be successful, they're going to keep doing it, which is the high action, the things that already have um, a following and things like that. So it makes sense as much as it stinks, but you know, hopefully they'll come up with another way because I would like to see something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know I definitely do. I don't know about you, Mary, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Um, so another thing I've noticed as well is that you've also gradually seen over the years there is some interest in funding from China in terms of budgets and co-productions, actually. Like a pretty good example is The Great Wall, which I have not actually watched the entire thing. I've only seen bits of it because, to be honest, that kind of a movie is not really my kind of thing. But I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about it. Like, I mean, the plot does sound kind of silly, to be honest with you, but if you just want like some kind of sci-fi-ish monster movie type of thing, then go for it. But it's basically a Chinese produced, Chinese filmed movie where the director is one of the most famous directors of China, who is Zhang Yimou. For those of you who may not be familiar with him, if any of you had seen the 2008 Beijing Summer Olympics, he was the one who directed the opening ceremony. Yeah. Also, he is the director of House of Flying Daggers, which is a movie that got released here in the US back in 2002. For like a couple of years after, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was released, there was a slight spike of interest in Chinese language movies because that movie was amazingly directed and visually beautiful, and the story was very good as well. It was a very intricate plot. I mean, of course, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a movie that's also a adaptation of a novel, so that could partially explain why the plot was pretty good.
Yeah.
True.
But I remember watching it when it came out, or like a year or so after it came out. I think it was a good movie. I remember
Yeah,
that
it was a
one.
very good movie. Right. So because of how well that movie did, there was like for a couple of years like a short spike of interest in Chinese language movies, particularly ones from mainland China. Because of course, Crouching Tiger is in Mandarin, which is what they primarily speak in the mainland. Which is like very different from, back in like the 80s and 90s when the Hong Kong action movies were really popular. Because those movies were primarily spoken in Cantonese, which is a very different dialect of Chinese, and also the subject matter was a bit different. But yeah, so one of the movies that was released in this short term spike of interest was House of Flying Daggers. That one was, I mean, actually, that one was a very good movie as well. I mean, it may not be as good as Crouching Tiger, but I thought it was a very good movie. I mean, at the very least, if you were to watch it, the visuals alone are amazing. But I'll let you guys like whenever you have the time to go check it out for yourselves. But anyway, back to my earlier point. So the interesting thing about Great Wall, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is that most of the cast are, of course, Chinese actors, but the interesting thing is they did actually cast a couple of Hollywood actors you guys may have heard of, one of whom is Matt Damon.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yes, I have heard of him.
Yeah, you may have heard of that guy. He's done a few
Only a little
movies.
bit.
Just a slight amount, not much.
Yeah. And the other funny thing was they also had Pedro Pascal in it as well.
Heard of
Yeah.
him too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was kind of funny. Like they actually had a couple of Hollywood actors, but there you go. And they also had Mr. Willem Dafoe in it. I almost forgot he was in it too.
Like him, he's a good
Yeah.
actor.
Yeah, he's a very good actor. I mean, I don't know what they promised the three of them to like be in this movie, but they must have promised them something or other. Because I mean, it's not the most it's not the most like complex, thought provoking plot or anything. I mean, like the rough plot line is basically you have these three foreigners, mercenaries, show up in China. They get arrested and then they somehow get pulled into a situation at the Great Wall where they find out that for people who don't know the rough history, basically the Great Wall is like a giant wall that is supposed to protect China from foreign invaders from coming in. So in this movie, it turns out that yes, the Great Wall is designed to protect the country from invaders, but it's not, Mongolian hordes or any such thing. No, according to this movie, it is these alien monsters, creature things that attack every so often, and the guards at the Great Wall are supposed to kill them before they can somehow get up past the wall and start killing everybody in the rest of China. And yeah, that's a rough plot line. That's all you really need to know.
Well then.
Like you were saying, if you feel like, a relatively mindless, not overly complex plot, action movie, sci-fi action movie, then, there you go.
That
Definitely up there.
that might make the list of when I need something mindless to watch and I don't.
When you're like cleaning and you need something on in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes that's what a lot of those movies end up being for me. I just like I'll put them on and I'll do something else completely different and it's just background noise.
Yeah.
And I look over every once in a while. Oh, pretty car on TV. Oh, there's an explosion. Okay.
Yeah, there's like monsters dying, screaming, people jumping off walls.
So basically your typical sci-fi action horror movie.
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much. Yeah, the only difference is that it's in Chinese. Some of the dialogue. That's the only other thing. And the monsters look a bit different than what you may be used to, but otherwise, it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was actually kind of fascinating, like how that was an example of, a collaboration of sorts between Hollywood and the Chinese film industry to create, like, I guess like some type of a partnership, even if it's just for one or two projects, really. Because again, it's all about getting the proverbial foothold into a huge movie market, just like how India is another huge movie market. I mean, they have over 1 billion people too.
Right.
Right. But the thing is that the reason why Hollywood is trying so hard with China is because China is very restrictive of how many foreign movies are allowed in Chinese movie theaters, because of course they are a communist society where they control everything.
Right.
So, including controlling what type of content the people are allowed to watch, because of course you wouldn't want to corrupt them with unpatriotic thoughts and whatnot.
And
So,
yet Captain America got through.
yeah, but I think, but part of it was they renamed the title, so it's not. I think they renamed it just as the First Avenger or something like that. But yeah, I mean, they allowed it.
Like with all the articles that I've read, and then obviously like this conversation, it really just makes me happy to, live where I live, that like, the censorship isn't as, you have people that try to censor, but for the most part, with the US, like you can, everything's fair game.
Right.
Let the people decide for themselves. But it's, you have these countries that, their governments control everything.
Right.
It's, it's sad.
Yeah.
It really is.
Right.
It is because I mean, not to get too political with it, but I mean they took off certain emojis right before the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. So they took off like the cake emoji with candles, so people couldn't like quote unquote, I guess, celebrate or remember Tiananmen Square as the horrific tragedy that it was.
Right, because of course that never happened. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like reading that. I mean, I knew. Granted, before we started talking about this topic and wanting to do this topic, it was like I knew some things. Like I knew it was a more oppressive government, and I mean, obviously, but you don't really think of. I didn't really think about it, and how. I guess I didn't really realize exactly how oppressive it was until I started researching it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that, like I said, I don't want to get too political with it, but it just boggles my mind that they would do that. They're so afraid of their image that they would do something like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, like I don't want to get overly political, but at the same time, we kind of have to talk about it to a certain degree because it's part of understanding the context of why
Hmm.
they do the things they do in relation to Hollywood. Okay. So the thing is that with this whole, I guess, if we want to, if, like, as we would call it, like repression of like ideas and things like that, the thing is that I talked about earlier, of course, like the very old concept of not wanting to have a poor appearance, right?
Right.
So there's another concept that's also a very old concept. I mean, this is like I'm talking about a concept that's existed since imperial ancient China times, but
Hmm.
there is a concept of the quote unquote harmonious society, which is something that the Communist Party really wants to maintain because in order to have a harmonious society, which is like, a peaceful, constructive, well functioning society, you want to have everybody be satisfied with how things are. Therefore, mentioning anything in which, if you're pointing out problems, oh, now you're bringing attention to very disruptive, chaotic, negative things that's going to cause people to get upset, you know.
Right.
Hmm.
So now it just reemphasizes how you need to control this negativity before it gets out of control and now everybody is angry and nobody is satisfied and revolutions start happening, which for people who may not be familiar with some of the history of China, many times dynasties have fallen because people got fed up. They got fed up with this dynasty and they're like, you people have messed up everything and we don't trust you anymore. And you start having peasant rebellions happening. And then the next thing you know, you have a new dynasty start up because they are going to try to fix everything that the last guy failed to do.
Hmm.
And of course, any political power, any political leader, they do not want a revolution where people get rid of you.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. Yeah. So that just kind of adds to that. So that is why, one of the many rules of, what is allowed and not allowed in terms of foreign films is they have like criteria of like what type of things are approved or not approved of in
It's
terms
all
of,
about control.
yeah, it's all about control. They want to control what kind of ideas are being disseminated. Okay. Which I don't know if you got a chance to look at it, Sam, but like I shared, uh I mean, granted it's Wikipedia, but it does a pretty good summary. Like, they pulled a lot of different sources here, but they kind of summarize like some of the basic, you know, I don't know if you want to call it rules or criteria, but they're like certain things that, are not allowed in terms of content. So it's either they will just outright ban it if you refuse to change anything or you can't change it, or they're going to force you to edit stuff, which again brings up the earlier point I was talking about before, which is that it's starting to cause Hollywood to maybe second guess a little bit on what type of content they are going to have in some of their movies, especially the movies that they really want to have shown in China.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's funny because like that's where I saw like the list. It's amazing how many movies that were made in China were banned. Obviously, like a lot of American movies.
Hmm.
and then Hong Kong has a couple, but it's there's a lot of Chinese movies that were banned completely, and then like it's and obviously the reasons for it, it's some of them, like it makes kind of makes me laugh because like one of the first ones is Ben-Hur, and the Ten Commandments, and obviously they consider it a superstitious film
Right.
because it's a religion that they don't you know believe in or have there and stuff. So it's kind of they don't like imagination or anything there either, because like Back to the Future was banned because it was regarding time travel. No time travel in China.
Yeah.
But
Right.
direct to video somehow got approved. So I'm guessing like direct to video is like our kind of like what like Blockbuster was and stuff like that, or I don't know if you know what
Yeah.
direct to video is. So basically like you could buy it on video,
Right.
but you can't go see it in the films
Right.
or in the theater, I should say.
And I don't think they show it on TV either or
Right.
anything like that. It's not on any of like their streaming stuff, but you could at one point
There are yeah,
buy
sorry,
it.
go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. There are several though that were banned and then eventually was released,
Right.
which is interesting. So it's
Yeah.
like they'll ban it for a little bit and then be like, all right, fine, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, that has a lot, like the decision to like initially ban something and then later allow it. Sometimes that has to do with the political mood of the time when
Mhm.
the thing was eventually allowed to be shown or distributed in China. Because, like with any kind of government in any country, there are times where the government will be more liberal and other times will be more conservative. So, I mean, that's a big part of that reasoning. But yeah, it is very strange sometimes for people. So, just as a side note, which to explain the religion thing. So, now, I mean, I don't know how familiar like people in the audience are with like generally communism is, but basically with communism, especially how it's practiced in China and how it used to be in the Soviet Union, is that they consider things like religion as being superstitious. And like basically the idea is that old ideas like religion of any kind are these old-fashioned ideas that's preventing the society from progressing to more modern times, more modern thinking, which is going to be more logical. You need facts here and not just assume that some magic sky god or whatever is going to hear your prayers and magically make things happen for you. That, it's that kind of thinking. So that's why one of the rules in terms of like content that is not allowed is anything that has to do with the supernatural and religion, because like I was just saying, it's because it's like illogical and old fashioned thinking, and they want to get rid of that.
Right.
Let's see. Any other interesting observations you guys may have that I we could talk about, or you need me to clarify or anything? Um,
No, I mean, this is a very good topic, but at the same time, it's really hard not to get political with it.
yeah,
And that's not something that we want to really do,
yeah,
other than explaining like what their government is. Because I mean, people people hear the word communism and it's a communist country, but I don't think a lot of people really understand what that actually entails. And it's basically the government controls everything.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because the idea was like, okay, um, it's like the original idea was that okay, you have the government representing the people, and the government will be responsible for dividing up everything to make sure things are equal. as possible for everybody, which in a theoretical sense is a good thing because you're trying to equalize everything and make sure that nobody is deprived of things that everybody else gets. So you don't have a case where like, okay, one person has 100 of one of these of like, I don't know, like let's say books or whatever. So one person has 100 books and then everybody else has none or maybe only one. But you're now dividing it up so that everybody has the same amount, which, in a hypothetical, theoretical
On
utopia,
paper.
we all should be able to have everything that, basic things. We should all be able to have it, but we don't. So it's like so they, they initially try to make that happen, but of course this is reality. This is reality. This is the real world. I mean, there's only so much supply of anything and everything. And, if you have a very limited supply, but you have a lot of people, how much can you divide really? That would be enough for everybody really. Because, the more
Yeah.
people you have, the smaller you can divide up stuff. So, so somehow this evolved into, well, now we have to control everything. So, including what people are allowed and not allowed to see. And, if you grew up this way, you wouldn't know any different. You wouldn't know that you may not even realize that there was all this other stuff that you were missing on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But at the same time, some people may start suspecting something because the thing is that as controlling as they are with like, Hollywood content, the thing is that, every once in a while the cracks kind of show a little bit. And that leads to small protesting, which leads to conflict, which leads to very strong ways of getting rid of the conflict. And then everything's all peaceful again, but not really.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I said, it was just amazing. It's like you hear it, but you may not really realize and understand what people may or may not know exactly what that meant. So it's good to clarify, kind of like on paper, it seems like a good idea. It's one of those like, it seemed like it's a great idea, but it doesn't work in real life.
right. And not to mention, theoretical, communism. It actually would work if you're talking about like, let's say you're part of a neighborhood. Okay. Everybody in the neighborhood agrees that, okay, let's pool together our stuff. Okay. And then we divide it up amongst the people in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
That is where it could hypothetically work versus an entire country, because in a neighborhood, you would be more familiar with people in your neighborhood. So if a neighbor was experiencing a problem, even if it's like a temporary problem, you would be more willing to help them out,
Mm-hmm.
because you're familiar with them. They're almost like a friend of yours, really, versus somebody who is like 1,000 miles away from you in the other side of the country. You don't know them. Would you instinctively help them? Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't,
Right.
and like I said earlier, when you start, increasing the pool of people, that you're trying to divide the limited resources with, it could progressively get smaller. How much is your share if you were to really divide it up equally? So would it really work? Does it actually work when you're dealing with over 1 billion people?
Yeah, not
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Right. Which is why, like what I mentioned earlier about how there's the concept of a harmonious society, and, making sure that you present a good face to the public of how things are.
Mhm.
Now, when you take those things into account, now you start to see this is the type of society, this is the type of government that you are dealing with, which, again, connecting back to Hollywood, this is a type of movie market you as a capitalist Western movie industry are trying to get your foot into. And, if you don't play by the rules that they established, you are going to get less stuff shown in the country if you don't follow their rules, which again leads to the whole thing we were talking about earlier about how this is now affecting what kind of content Hollywood is producing, which in turn affects what we as part of the American movie market are able to see as
Right.
well. So this is how this all is like one giant circle of things connecting. Thanks for listening, everyone. Catch us next time.
And see what we're going to talk about.
Because the three fates decide.